An elderly man saves a freezing mare and her trapped foal. What followed left everyone in awe. For that, you have to watch the full video. The freezing storm showed no mercy, swallowing the land in ice and snow. In the heart of this merciless winter, an elderly man stumbled upon a sight that made his blood run cold. A desperate mare, trembling, her eyes pleading for help. And beneath her, a tiny foal, trapped, barely clinging to life. Time was running out. The cold was unforgiving. The odds, impossible. But what happened next left even the toughest hearts shaken. Who or what would come to their aid in this brutal wilderness? The answer will leave you speechless. Watch until the end, because this is a story you won't forget. If you enjoyed this video and found it valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us create more amazing content and bring you incredible stories. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. And if you know someone who would love this video, share it with them. It means the world to us. Thank you for being a part of our journey. Let's get started this story before wasting your time. So as he adjusted his scarf, trying to shield his face from the blistering cold, a sound sliced through the air, a desperate, chilling neigh. He stopped in his tracks. The sound wasn't distant, it was close, filled with urgency and fear. His heart pounded as he turned toward the source, squinting through the flurries of snow. Something was out there, something struggling, suffering. Instinct took over. He moved carefully through the deep snow, his boots sinking with every step. The further he walked, the louder the cries became. They weren't just from one horse. There were two. Something was terribly wrong. He picked up his pace, ignoring the biting wind and the creeping numbness in his fingers. As he reached a clearing, his breath caught in his throat. There, half buried in the snow, stood a mare, her body trembling, her breath visible in the freezing air. But it was her eyes that truly struck him. Wide, pleading, filled with fear. She wasn't just suffering from the cold, she was guarding something. The old man's gaze dropped to the ground, and that's when he saw it. A tiny foal trapped beneath the ice, barely moving. The old man's chest tightened. The foal let out a weak, pitiful cry, its fragile body shivering uncontrollably. If he didn't act fast, it wouldn't make it through the night. But the storm was worsening. The temperature was dropping fast. Could he save them before it was too late? And then, a distant sound sent a jolt of fear through his body. Something else was lurking in the darkness. The old man's pulse quickened as he stood frozen in place, his breath coming out in quick, visible puffs. The mare's distress was undeniable. Her large, dark eyes pleaded with him, her body trembling not just from the cold, but from sheer desperation. But it was what lay beneath her that sent a shiver down his spine. The foal was trapped. At first glance, it was almost impossible to see. The thick layer of snow, whipped around by the wind, had nearly buried the tiny creature alive. Only its fragile head and part of its back were visible, barely moving. Its thin, frail body was coated in ice, its legs awkwardly twisted beneath the frozen crust. How long had it been trapped like this? How much longer could it last? The old man dropped to his knees, the cold biting through his clothes. He reached out, brushing away the snow to reveal more of the foal's body. It was even worse than he feared. The little one was exhausted, its breath shallow, its eyes struggling to stay open. The mare let out a panicked neigh, shifting her weight anxiously, as if urging him to do something, anything, before it was too late. He ran his calloused hand over the foal's tiny frame. It was so cold. Too cold. The old man had seen what winter could do to the weak and vulnerable. If the foal wasn't freed soon, its body would shut down. He didn't have hours. He had minutes. But how had this happened? How did a mare and her newborn foal end up stranded in the middle of nowhere, fighting for survival? As he scanned the area, searching for any sign of a broken fence or a trail leading to their herd, something in the distance caught his eye. A dark shape moving through the storm. His heart leaped. Was it another horse? A rescuer? Or was it something much, much worse? A sudden gust of wind howled through the trees, and the foal let out another weak cry. The old man had to act now. There was no time to think, No time to hesitate. If he didn't pull the foal from the ice immediately, it would never see another sunrise. And yet the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine wouldn't go away. Something wasn't right. Something was out there, watching, waiting. The old man's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer urgency of the moment. Time was slipping away. The foal's shivering was becoming weaker, its fragile body barely responding. The mare stomped her hooves in the snow, letting out another distressed neigh, her eyes darting between the man and her baby. She knew, just as he did, that if something wasn't done right now, the foal wouldn't survive. Without hesitation, the man removed his thick gloves and dug into the ice with his bare hands. The cold burned like fire. His fingers stiffened almost instantly, but he pushed through the pain, breaking away chunks of ice around the foal's tiny body. Every second counted. His heart pounded in his chest as he worked. He knew the dangers of exposure, knew how quickly a living being could succumb to the freezing grip of winter. But the ice was thicker than he expected. Too thick. His breath came in ragged gasps, and for a moment, doubt crept in. Could he do this alone? His old bones ached from the cold, and exhaustion tugged at his limbs. He was fighting against nature itself, an enemy that had claimed many lives before. But he refused to let this foal be another victim. Grunting with effort, he grabbed his small axe from his belt and began hacking at the ice. Each strike sent painful vibrations through his hands, but he didn't stop. Shards of ice flew as he carved away for the foal to move. But the little one remained still, its breaths growing fainter. No, he couldn't lose it now. He reached for the foal's body, trying to pull it free. But the moment he lifted, the mare let out a deafening scream and lunged forward. She wasn't attacking, but she was terrified. Her protective instincts kicked in, and she circled closer, nostrils flaring. Would she trust him, or would she fight to keep him away? The storm raged on, howling around them, as the man looked into the mare's desperate eyes. He needed her trust, needed her to let him save her baby. Slowly, he placed a hand on her neck, speaking in a calm, low voice, the way he had with horses all his life. The mare hesitated. And then, she stepped back. It was all he needed. With one final desperate pull, the foal's body shifted. It was free. But then, a sound stopped him cold. A deep, guttural growl echoed from the shadows of the trees. The old man turned sharply, his breath hitching. Something was out there. Something that had been watching them all along. The old man barely had a moment to process what was happening before the deep, menacing growl echoed through the frozen air once more. His body tensed. Something was watching. Something was waiting. He turned his head slowly, scanning the darkness beyond the trees. The snowstorm made it impossible to see clearly, but he knew he wasn't alone. His pulse pounded in his ears as he listened, waiting for another sign of movement. Was it a wolf? A mountain lion? Had the scent of the struggling mare and her helpless foal attracted a predator? The foal let out a weak, pitiful cry, snapping the old man's attention back to what mattered most. There was no time to be afraid. If he didn't act now, the cold would take the foal long before any predator did. His stiff, frozen hands fumbled as he struggled to lift the foal. It was lighter than he expected. Too light. The poor thing had barely any strength left, its legs collapsing under its own weight. The mare let out another anxious whinny, nudging her baby, trying to encourage it to stand. But the foal didn't move. Panic set in. "No, no, come on, little one," the old man muttered, his voice shaking from more than just the cold. He rubbed the foal's body, trying to warm it up, but it was like touching ice. This was bad. He knew what happened to animals that got too cold. Their bodies shut down, slowly, quietly, until they just stopped. He couldn't let that happen. Gritting his teeth, he reached for his thick coat and wrapped the foal in it, pulling it close to his chest. His own body heat was the only thing keeping it alive now. The mare paced nervously beside him, nudging his shoulder as if urging him to do something. But what more could he do? And then, another sound. This time it wasn't a growl. It was a snapping branch, closer than before. The old man's breath hitched. His eyes darted to the trees again. Something was definitely there. He had lived in these woods for decades, and he knew that sound, It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't the snow shifting. Something, or someone, was approaching. His mind raced. If it was a predator, he had no way to fight it off. If it was a person, why weren't they calling out? A sense of dread filled his chest. The foal shuddered in his arms, barely holding on. The mare stomped her hooves, her body shifting uneasily. The storm was getting worse. The cold was getting stronger, and something was lurking in the darkness. He had to get them out of here, fast. But before he could move, a shadow emerged from the trees, and his blood ran cold. The old man's breath caught in his throat as the shadow moved closer. His frozen fingers gripped the foal tightly, ready to defend it with everything he had. The mare let out a sharp whinny, stepping protectively in front of her baby. Whatever was approaching was only a few steps away now. Then, the shadow took form. A massive wild stallion emerged from the storm, its dark mane whipping in the wind. Its eyes burned with an intensity the old man had never seen before. This was no ordinary horse. This was a leader, a protector. The kind of stallion that ruled over wild herds. The kind that would fight to the death to defend its own. But what was it doing here? And why now? The stallion stomped the ground, its breath heavy, nostrils flaring as it took in the sight before it. The exhausted mare, the motionless foal, and the old man crouched in the snow, shielding the newborn with his own body. For a split second, everything stood still. Then the stallion did something that left the old man speechless. It stepped forward and lowered its head toward the foal. The mare let out a soft, broken whimper, nudging the stallion's neck as if pleading for help. And to the old man's shock, the stallion responded, gently brushing its muzzle against the foal's frozen body. It was a sign of acceptance, a sign of protection, a sign that this foal belonged. But the foal still wasn't moving. Had they been too late? Desperation surged through the old man's veins. He refused to let this little life slip away. With one last burst of strength, he rubbed the foal's chest, massaging its tiny body, whispering words of encouragement. "Come on, little one, stay with us." Seconds passed. The storm raged on. And then, it happened. The foal's tiny ears twitched. A breath, a movement, a spark of life. The mare let out a joyful, desperate neigh. The stallion lifted its head high, as if sensing the shift. The foal opened its eyes. The old man felt his chest tighten. It was alive. Tears stung his eyes, not from the cold, but from the sheer, overwhelming relief. Against all odds, against nature itself, this foal had survived. But what happened next was even more astonishing. The stallion stepped back and turned toward the trees, then let out a powerful call into the night. The sound echoed through the frozen forest, and moments later, more shadows appeared. The old man's breath hitched. A herd of wild horses emerged from the storm, their bodies strong, their eyes locked onto the tiny foal. They had come. They had heard the call, and in that moment, the old man realized this was no ordinary stallion. This was the foal's father. The old man stood frozen, his breath coming in short, visible puffs as he took in the breathtaking sight before him. The herd had come. One by one, majestic wild horses emerged from the blizzard, their strong bodies dusted with snow, their eyes fixed on the fragile foal in his arms. It was as if nature itself had sent them. The stallion, the foal's father, stood tall, his powerful frame silhouetted against the storm. His gaze held an unspoken message. He had come to reclaim what was his. The old man swallowed hard. He had fought so desperately to save the foal, to keep it warm, to give it a second chance. And now, just like that, it was time to let go. Was the foal strong enough to survive in the wild? Could it keep up with the herd after coming so close to death? He hesitated. The foal was still weak, its tiny legs trembling beneath its body. Would it even survive the next few hours? But then, something incredible happened. The mare stepped forward, lowering her head and gently nudging her baby. A mother's instinct, a mother's love. She was encouraging it, telling it to stand, to fight, to live. The old man held his breath. "Come on, little one. You can do this." The foal swayed, struggling. Its legs wobbled, nearly buckling beneath it. The storm howled around them. For a moment it seemed impossible. Then, with a sudden burst of strength, the foal stood tall. The old man felt his chest tighten. It was a miracle. The stallion let out a low, approving snort. The herd shifted, waiting. And in that moment, the foal turned to the old man. Just for a second, their eyes met. A silent thank you. A moment neither would forget. Then, with one last push from its mother, the foal took its first step toward the herd. The stallion let out a deep, commanding call, and the herd began to move. One by one, they disappeared into the snowy wilderness, their powerful forms vanishing like ghosts into the storm. The mare lingered for a moment, her eyes filled with gratitude. Then she too turned and followed. And just like that, they were gone. The old man stood alone in the snow, his heart heavy yet full. He had done what he came to do. He had saved a life, witnessed a miracle, and played a part in something far greater than himself. As he turned back toward his cabin, the wind suddenly calmed. The storm had passed, and in the distance, a faint echoing neigh carried through the night. A farewell, a reminder. Somewhere out there, a foal was alive because he had answered the call.